Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord Emperor of the Dracovin Empire. Welcome. It is time to continue our discussion on anime series, reviewing them, and letting you know some suggestions in using them in your BESM games. Of course, I have two new ones that were displayed in this season, which also have been in older seasons, of course, and two ones that are more classics from 2015. But let's talk about the two that, yes, they have been in other seasons before, but they also had some showings in this season. Strike the Blood and Majestic Prince. So let's start with Strike the Blood. So Strike the Blood focuses on this world where we have Kojo, who is a young vampire just trying to go to high school. He is basically being observed by Yukina, this sword sage which has been put in charge of keeping an eye on him. He lives within the Demon District, this area on an artificial island in Japan, where monsters can freely live. Now, he is rumored to be the fourth progenitor. Effectively, there are these three progenitor vampires, which are the most important figures in the monster world. And he is rumored to be a fourth one, a destabilization of the entire system that is in play. So he oftentimes has to deal with other students at his school, other monsters, other supernatural threats, and other threats from the progenitors themselves because of the position he's been put in. Now, the genres for this one are, of course, supernatural. He's a vampire. He can summon these powerful familiars when he drinks blood, though he tries to avoid it like there's no tomorrow. And he has this effective group of characters around him with special powers that fight against the various monsters. It's action. There are big battle scenes that happen very often in battles against various supernatural monsters that make for great action set pieces. It is also a harem. He tends to end to, just because I guess the connection with him being a vampire, he unintentionally sort of gets a lot of girls to really like him. Some of them have always liked him. Others have sort of fallen for him because he does tend to do the right thing, even though it's for maybe keeping his own peace. It's just he doesn't like the bad things around him possibly occurring. Now I rate this one a 5. For a harem anime, it's actually really good. The harem elements aren't too heavy, and I enjoy a lot of the action and supernatural elements, so it is one of my favorites that's appeared in the various seasons that it has shown up in. Now, I would recommend 500 points for playing this in your BESM game. You're going to make your characters either friends of Kojo's, or possibly members of his harem. Effectively, what you're going to be is he's going to be an NPC figure, this fourth progenitor figure that is causing a lot of the problems in the city. And you're going to be a member of the team basically dealing with it, either directly with Kojo or indirectly. And you're going to be related to the various supernatural threats, monster threats, or perhaps threats from within the city, or, as I said, from the fourth progenitor. And it's up to you how much of the manga and or anime source that you want to take in and use for your games. So let's talk about Majestic Prince. Now, Majestic Prince is set in the distant future, where humanity has begun to explore at least the star system in order to gain resources to continue their expansion. They have also advanced in technology to a degree that the NTP has been developed, basically manipulating the genetics of young children and creating this sort of race of genetically engineered children which are supposed to be more adapted to space travel and be the generation which will be taking them out into space, to taking them out to exploring and living in space. Unfortunately, then, this alien race, the Wulgara, attacks, and these children here, the NTP children, they are the ones that are actually drafted to be the frontline soldiers because they are more adapted for this battle against space aliens because of the nature of their own genetic makeup, unfortunately for them. Our episodes focus on Team Rabbits, this team that has had some trouble with teamwork and their own problems in their lives, and they're actually chosen to be test pilots for a special program of new mecha. The AHSMB mecha, the newly developed ones for space battling, using an advanced system called the Jura system, are granted to them. And they have to learn to dive into the depths of their own psyches, personalities, their way of getting along with each other, and their very emotions, and sort of accept a lot of who they are inside in order to unlock the various degrees of power within this Jura system, which pushes them far beyond what a normal fighter would be in the traditional military they had. This eventually leads themselves to be an ace against the Wulgara. being one of the main protectors of humanity. Now, for the genres of this, it's of course a science fiction. It's set in the future with space travel, mecha, aliens. It's very science fiction. And of course, it's a mecha anime. They have giant robots which they pilot out into space as a team of them to deal battle against the Wolgara and their robot menace and their mechas, which they're also fighting us against. I would also call this one an action. There are big space battle scenes. It's not action heavy all the time, but when the action scenes come, they are great and they showcase their ability to fight as a unit. And of course, they have their hiccups along the way, but the more they develop their smoothness and their teamwork, the stronger unit they become. I rate this one a 5. It was one of my favorites when it originally came out, and the materials they've been releasing now with a new extra episode when they re-showed the episodes and a movie show good that maybe they'll do a second season in the future. It's a very good series to check out. Now, if you're using it in a BESM game, I recommend 450 points. You're going to make your group of characters a team like Team Rabbits, that they're going to have their own problems, perhaps have some teamwork problems, and they're going to have their own mecha which they're going to use to go out into space and battle against the Wolgara. They're going to be put in a position similar to Team Rabbits. You can either have your characters replace them, or be on a different front. The battle is going over a large sets of areas. Perhaps they're fighting in a different area than Team Rabbits and have their own battles to deal with. Maybe their own experimental ships that they're using, very similar to the ones that Team Rabbits is test piloting. I'd probably recommend going along those routes. And of course, they're going to deal with their own emotional problems and the own history that they've had as these genetically engineered children that have a different life than most other children have had. And you're going to deal with a lot of that to deal with them unlocking deeper potentials on their connections to their mecha. Now let's talk about two more from 2015, Knights of Sidonia and Triage X. So with Knights of Sidonia, we are set in the year 3394, about 1,000 years after this alien race drove humanity from Earth. The Guara, a kind of shape-changing alien which found nearly impossible for humanity to defeat. They left on these massive colony ships, and we focus on this one, Cydonia, who has evolved over all these years. We've found that genetic engineering has become very popular. There's human clonings, asexual reproduction, even photosynthesis in humans has become popular as genetic engineering has spread. Especially for the cloning. In amongst the top leaders of Cydonia, they actually gain new clone bodies that their minds are transferred into constantly, so they're effectively immortal. They continue to be plagued by the Guan as they travel along, and their mechanized soldiers are sent out to fight them. They're given these special weapons, these spears, which are the only things which can pierce the protective layer on their core, and basically pierce their core and kill them. They have very little of this mineral left, and it's the only thing they can use to fight against it, especially when this is when the series starts. We focus on Nagate. He was raised by his grandfather. Of course, it's one of the legendary figures who had Nagata separate from all the others and raised him on his own, effectively separating this child out from a lot of the genetic manipulation that occurs aboard the ship and training him to be a pilot, basically to replace him, rather than being cloned and continuing his life like he normally would have. In this retrospect, when Nagata is eventually found by the crew, he becomes an ace pilot and becomes one of the more powerful protectors of Cydonia. It is, of course, an action series. There's battles against the Guana, training amongst each other, fighting for positioning, and pilots for being top pilots or those that are elites exist within it that cause a lot of conflict and fighting. It's sci-fi. It's set over 1,000 years in the future, deep in space on a spaceship with genetic engineering. It is ridiculously sci-fi. And of course, it's a mecha. They pilot mechanized suits in order to battle the Guana, sometimes much more successfully than the others, but they manage to keep it at bay and protect Cydonia for many of the episodes. I rate this one a 3. There's just something a little... Without it being a drama, there is a level of depression about the entire thing and a level of dread against an enemy that they can barely beat. And unfortunately, with the loss of life that seems to occur a lot of times, it almost feels like a drama without being directly a drama, and that's one of the reasons I shied away from it. Now, I'd recommend 350 points for your characters. You're going to make them pilots of Cydonia. The pilots are taken at very young ages, so your characters are going to have been basically screened and taken as young ages and trained to be pilots. Each of them is going to have their own unique special sets of skills that they're bringing to the entire concept of the conflict, and skills as a pilot. They'll be dealing, of course, with the Iguana threatening the ship, but they'll also deal with some of the internal politics and what's going on within the ship, and possibly trying to eventually get Cydonia to a place where they can find safety from the threat of these aliens, and perhaps even colonize sometime in the future. Now let's talk about Triage X. Now, Triage X, we focus on Mochizuki General Hospital, which by day is just a normal hospital, but by night is the location of a vigilante group known as Black Label. It comes from a number of staff that work at the hospital, along with a number of high schoolers at the Mochizuki High School, which is nearby, combined together to form this vigilante group, which are sent on missions to effectively eliminate those that prove to be detriments to the society as a whole, causing damage to it, known as cancers. Effectively, Black Label's in charge of eliminating these cancers before they can spread their affection to the rest of society. Now, it's an action anime. When they're going after these figures, they're oftentimes criminals and have minions, or they might be in the underworld, or might be dangerous themselves. That gets into a lot of action-y scenes. It's that they're battling it out against them. It also has a very adventure feel, that they're traveling to the various locations to deal with these various cancers and eliminate them. It also has a very ecchi tone to it. It oftentimes hints at very ecchi things throughout it, very like lewd things going on. But it does it in such a way that it doesn't overpower you very often, most of the time, that the action and adventure do make up for it. But because I'm okay with ecchi, but not as great on it, and I don't like it being as forefront, it does reduce it to a 3 for this one. Because there probably is more than I think I would have wanted, but not so much to ruin the rest of the series for me. So if you're using this in a BESM game, I recommend 250 points. You're going to make your characters, of course, members of Black Label. And they're going to deal with the fact that they have these daily lives as either members of the hospital staff or high school students. And they're going to have some kind of dark past which drove them into joining Black Label, some kind of terrible thing that happened to them. And they're going to oftentimes be dealing with that, while at the same time dealing with their dual lives as both a vigilante and a member of just normal society, and the points and times where it might try to overlap. Your characters will go on various missions, of course, to eliminate these cancers, but some of them might hit close to home to them, and there happens with a lot of the overlap, which may occur and affect the characters on a more personal level. And there's where the best points of this story come in. So that's it for today. I introduced you to 4 more anime. Of course, 2 that are technically more from older points in time, but saw materials put out this season. This last season, I should really say, because January just started. Welcome to winter 2017. But as for that fall 2016, it still had some of that material. These ones that they showed were still great materials, and they're great series to talk about in general. And as for the ones from 2015, they maybe weren't the best ones for what they had, but they had great storylines and great settings that I think still would be great places to play BESM games within. So if any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and of course subscribe. It shows you support the channel, the Empire, and the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you could always check out my Patreon, linked in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.